Okay, right now we are going to do some small housekeeping and going to show you the very basics of C++ program itself. So you have finally downloaded the open source cross-platform IDE. IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. So what's an IDE? What is it for? Well, an IDE, as it says, Integrated Development Environment, it's a text editor, compiler, and linker all in one. So instead of text editing and then linking it all together and compiling in 3 separate stages, this is all in one for you and makes a nice handy dandy bin file which you can execute later on, which is what a compiler does. So before we begin, let's do a small thing. Go to setting and then go to compiler. Now, as before I said min-gw is the compiler you need, but there's one thing you need to change, and that's compiler flags. Now, C++ has updated quite a bit since it first arrived in the world, so make sure you have checked mark have G++ follow the C11 ISO C++ language standard. So certain libraries will be exclusively for C++11, which means it's the newest stuff out, which you want, because I mean, who wants to be programming 1998 crap anyways, right? So right now, this is just all my stuff, but in order to make a new file or a new project, you go to File, New, Project, or you just click this right here. Now you have a lot of stuff right here. You have a lot of stuff. But right now we're just going to do basic console application, which is the black and white command line, essentially. It's not command line, but I mean when you execute it, it's going to be black and white. C++, because we're doing C++, and right now this is my default location, YouTube / whatever, but you could make whatever file you want. Right now I'm just going to do basics and enter, finish, and then right now it's blank, but here is your manager, here is your projects, right here is your file project name, basics. So under source file you have a main.cpp. The main file is the file that the compiler will look for and go to. Here's your main function. A function is kind of like steps in a program, literally. So you have baking a cake. Well, that's very broad. So first you crack the eggs, then you mix the batter with the eggs, then you add the water, then you mix some more, then you pour it into a bowl and you bake it at a certain temperature. All of those are certain steps, which will be in your main function, and it could be more detailed by making functions on the outside. We'll cover functions later on, but right now we need to talk about this very basic total of 8 lines, including white space. So right here is your include statement. What this 21st century thank you hashtag, formerly known as a £, is your include statement. Include is a pre-macro, well, it is a macro, but it's a preprocessor directive, which means I'm going to include a library called IOStream, in, out, stream. So right here, you include libraries. We're going to go over different more including libraries and even define macro, but not now. Using namespace std, which using namespace is a type of thing. I mean, if you are from C#, then you know what namespace is all about. Then std stands for standard library, not sexually transmitted disease, but standard library. The reason why you declare this very specific keyword is so that you can use cout and inline without problem. Now, in order to comment things out, you would just go right in front and do the / twice. That means comment out. Comments are for the programmer themselves to make little messages to himself, which we'll do some once in a while. So right now, if I were to build and run, I'll get a compiler error saying cout was not declared in the scope. I'll explain scope in the next lesson. So cout is not declared in the scope. What does that mean? Well, before we were using the std, so in order to access cout and nl, which means nline, I'll have to keep on typing std, then these two colons, which I'll cover later on. So once I save, build, and run, then it's perfectly fine. but that's not very practical in the real world. If you were to see a professional programmer doing that over and over again, yeah, I don't know, doesn't really deserve to be a professional programmer. So that's why we use the using namespace std. It's standard, so do it. Now we have your int main. Your main function is the very first and main, that's why it's called main, the most important function in a C++ program, because the compiler is going to look for the keyword main and say, whatever is in the main, I'm going to do. Int is a return value. As you see, return 0, which means once the program is done doing its thing, it's going to return 0, so that means absolutely nothing's wrong. Well, right here, I have a very red and bad status because I pressed the X. If I were to build and run again and press any key to continue as I'm supposed to, it'll say terminated with status 0. So no headaches whatsoever. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So that's the very basics of a C++ program. You need your include, you need your std, and you need a main function with the return value of 0. Now, the newer versions of C++ does not need the return 0 because the computer would automatically understand your terminating program, but just for convention on older computers and such, return 0 is perfectly fine. And that's the very basics of a very basic C++ program, and I will explain more next tutorial.